session, Women and SDG15 protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss by Ms. Khouloud bin Mansour. Ms. Khouloud is a Tunisian leader and activist and part of the GEF Youth Task Force UN Women. She studied leadership and conflict resolution at California State University as part of a US State Department scholarship. She is a dedicated activist, passionate about women's and children's rights in Tunisia and around the world. She has received numerous awards for her hard work and has led her to take up various positions either on the executive board or as a focal point for several international NGOs. She currently represents many organizations and is actively working to serve her community. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you for your session.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is mine. I'm very honored and pleased to be here today with you during this session. I will start by sharing my screen for the presentation. Okay, the session is about the SDG number 15, to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainability, manage forests, to combat desertification and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity. The title for the presentation today would be about the role of the SDG 15 in underpinning the achievement of the 2030 agenda. We will start by a brief background about the SDGs and the SDG 15, and we will start by talking about the beginning of the background of the importance of natural resources. So the natural environment and its importance, including biodiversity and ecosystem services, has been recognized in international discourse on sustainable development for many decades. Following the 1987 publication on Our Common Future, also known as the Birduntil Report number 1, environmental concerns were increasingly connected to opportunities and challenges to development. The United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, held in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, brought the issue of the conservation of biodiversity in this context, and its agenda 212 provided a framework for local, national, and global level action for the United Nations, other multilateral organizations, and national governments around the world. It was also the occasion for the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity to be opened for signature, leading it to entering into force the following year. So, statistically, in 2015, 6.6 billion people, around 91% of the global population, used an improved drinking water source, up from 82% in and among countries, and not all improved water sources are safely managed. Between 2000 and 2015, the proportion of the global population using improved sanitation increased from 59% to 68%. So around 4.9 billion people. In most parts of the world, especially the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, India, and China, overuse of water for agriculture has resulted in the serious depletion of rivers and aquifers, changes in hydrology, subsidence, and salinization of soils. The agriculture sector uses around 69% of fresh water. Therefore, integrated water resources management is an important aspect of sustainable water management. In 2012, 65% of the 130 countries that responded to an IWRM survey question reported that management plans were in place at the national level, though full implementation varies across regions. All this to say that the natural resources are being highly consumed by all regions across the world, and we are not being accountable for the loss of the natural resources, despite the fact that it's being quite implemented and quite used in several fields. Now, if we would like to call in action to support the SDG 15 and its implementation globally, we would call in an increase in efforts that address the drivers of biodiversity loss, efforts that increase agricultural production on existing land to reduce waste, enhance sustainable trade, and change diets towards less meat consumption. Some observed the SDG 15 targets that expire in 2020, noting that their replacement could provide an opportunity to create a more unified agenda that halts biodiversity loss by 2030. And also, we would like to raise the profile of biodiversity in SDG 15 in political discussions across the board. To mainstream biodiversity in all sectors and across sectors. Policy coherence and integration among all relevant sectors and actors, protecting customary land rights and securing land tenure for local populations, community-based management and participatory approaches in which indigenous peoples and local communities are co-designers. We know through the International Day of the Rural Women, which is today, that most rural women are being the most vulnerable communities in the agriculture field, and they are not having the right access to their rights, despite the fact that they present 80% of the participants and they represent 80% of the agriculture field. So we would like to have community-based management and community-based approaches in which these people have the rights deserved. Also, gender mainstreaming in all policies and programs, and cross-sectoral, cross-departmental, and multi-stakeholder collaboration, included through partnerships. So we are calling for an inclusive agenda, more inclusive and more coexistent agenda that supports the SDG 15 for the sake of everyone, to preserve the land and to avoid the loss and the waste of our natural resources. If we take the example of Latin America, which is known for the highest percentage and statistically known for the valuable resources they have, we would like to take on the lessons learned and the good practices with respect to the SDGs and its targets. We know that the restoration of ecosystems contributes to the achievement of biodiversity protection and land degradation. Neutrality targets and compliance with the Convention of Wetlands of International Importance, especially as waterfalls habitat. Therefore, within the framework of the Global Partnership for Ecosystem Restoration, El Salvador launched a national program, and together with the Central American Integration System, they have put forward the proposal to declare a United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. In March 2019, the General Assembly proclaimed that the 2021-2030, the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is very, very important because we need to have the same applied for all countries worldwide. The Colombian Sustainable Livestock Project is also an example of how silvopastoral production systems, which is the integration of different types of trees with livestock production and conservation of native forests, raise farm productivity while enhancing the provision of environmental goods and services. These methods include improved water regulation and erosion control, increased biodiversity and carbon storage, and reduced nitrogen oxide and methane gas emissions. This is also very valuable. We can take also the example of Egypt, which is leading the ecosystem and biodiversity SDGs 15 by promoting the eco-friendly mindset and by enhancing youth and CSO's partnership and inclusion in building trees and making more green spaces. In Brazil and Mexico, sustainable use protected areas, those that allow timber production, are more common than strictly protected areas. all of these lessons learned are supporting the SDG 15 because those countries and those parties have known the importance of the natural resources we have. They know that we can only lead and combat climate change and the environmental problems by leading a sustainable world. And this cannot happen unless we have unified powers and policy that are strong enough to build on and to lead more the road to SDG 15. Thank you so much. And finally, I would like to say that this is our planet, our future, our responsibility, so we must take action now. Thank you. And I'm free if you have any questions to ask.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khouloud, for that wonderful session. We don't have any questions as of now. We'll be sharing you offline if we have any. Thank you for the
Thank you.
inspiring session. Thank you.